Hello and welcome back to MadEmmyify True Crime. You may have noticed that I did miss an upload last week. I just was so tired last week. I'm sorry I couldn't record that video. I will be doing it at some point, but right now I'm gonna go back through some of my older cases that I've done on my ASMR channel and read them at a normal volume for them all. I'm gonna read a case that was just quite a short one that I did, I think, in November or December of 2020, and that case was the Merry Widow of Windy Nook. I quite like this one because it's a local one and it's about a sweet old lady that poisons her husbands. What is not to love? Tonight's title sounds a bit like a delightful children's book that's going to be about a lovely old lady who bakes cookies, but unfortunately the Merry Widow of Windy Nook is not a kid's story at all, but a nickname given to serial killer Mary Elizabeth Wilson, who was actually the last woman to be sentenced to death in the UK in 1958. Mary Elizabeth Cassidy, as she was known, was born on June 11th, 1889 in Catchgate in Stanley, which is in County Durham, and she was christened a few weeks later on June 30th at Our Blessed Lady and St Joseph's Church. Not much is really known about Mary's childhood, but at some point in her teens she began working in service to the Knowles family, striking up a friendship with their son, who was a labourer, and eventually this developed into a relationship, and Mary and John Knowles married in November 1914. They settled in a house in Windy Nook in Gateshead, and during the course of their marriage John and Mary had 3 children, though unfortunately 2 of these did not survive infancy, though that was quite common back then. Infant mortality was very high. Eventually Mary took a lover, a young man named John Russell. He moved into the couple's house and lived with the family. I don't know if the affair was an open secret or if John Knowles was just oblivious to the whole thing, but they lived as, I suppose, a throuple, as it will be called now. In 1955, John Knowles died suddenly. His cause of death was ruled as being from tuberculosis, which was a big killer at the time. Mary didn't waste time, and 5 months later she married John Russell, trading in one John for another, I suppose. By the end of 1956, John number 2 was also dead by natural causes. Both men had left everything they owned to Mary, and she inherited the massive sum of £42. Now that would have been a hell of a lot of money back then. By June of 1957, Mary, now aged 64, had married husband number 3, a wealthy retired estate agent called Oliver Leonard. They married at the registry office in Jarrow. Just 12 days after the wedding, Oliver was taken ill. Mary called over one of her neighbours, who confirmed he was indeed very unwell. By the next morning, Oliver was dead. He had been aged 75, so when the doctor examined him, he ruled that the cause of death was heart failure, and it didn't seem suspicious. Mary inherited £50 from Oliver. Very soon after the death of husband number 3, Mary moved into a rundown bungalow belonging to Ernest Wilson. Mary soon learned that Wilson not only had £100 in a co-op account, but also a fully paid life insurance policy. Again, almost straight after the wedding, husband number 4 took ill and died of what the doctors ruled to be cardiac muscular failure. Mary couldn't even be bothered to go to the funeral of Ernest Wilson. I mean, I suppose when you've been to 3 husbands' funerals, you've been to them all. By this time, with 4 marriages and 4 dead husbands, 3 in the space of just 2 years, Mary was becoming kind of a figure of local gossip. It wasn't only the frequency of which her spouses died that got people talking, but also her cheery attitude towards these events. She finally caught the attention of local police after she had joked at her wedding reception that any leftover sandwiches would be fresh enough to be kept for the wake. She had also asked the local funeral directors if she could have a trade discount due to the amount of business she was bringing them. Police decided to exhume the bodies of Oliver Leonard and Ernest Wilson to conduct an autopsy, and the pathologists confirmed both men had died from phosphorus poisoning. Mary was tried at the Leeds Assizes, which is like a local form of court that was later overtaken by the Crown Court in March 1958. At her trial, Mary didn't give any evidence, though her defence tried to claim that both Oliver and Ernest had taken some sort of sexual stimulant pills that contain this phosphorus, and they'd just overdosed on them. The jury didn't believe this defence, and she was found guilty after just 90 minutes of deliberation. Initially, Mary was sentenced to death, but due to her age, she was granted clemency and sent to Holloway Women's Prison, where she served just 4.5 years of her sentence before she died at the age of 70. Her great-granddaughters still live locally in Trimden, and their great-grandmother's crime isn't particularly a secret. In fact, as the kids grew up, family members would often joke that if you don't behave, great granny's gonna get you. So yeah, that was the Merry Widow of Windy Nook, a very short case for you today, I'm afraid, but I hope you enjoyed it nonetheless. Good night, and don't have nightmares.